There we go. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is so great to have you today. I'm very excited for our class today about the varieties of slave life in the American South. And actually, you know, that is not the class that I'm excited about teaching today because we did that one last time. So I'm excited about teaching another one that hopefully is here. Let's see. Maybe he has it behind here. Oh, here we go. Okay, good. I was like, wait, that's not the right one. Okay, here we go. I'm excited about teaching slavery, the United States Constitution, and then debates about importation of slaves. And we'll see that those debates are in the state ratifying conventions and by state representatives. So I think those are really fantastic documents that I'm very excited with. I've got an activity that I'm happy about. It even comes in a sealed envelope that I prepared for you. So we'll have to unveil it during our second hour together. But before we start then with our topic today, let's see. Brenna, would you be willing to offer our opening prayer?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Here's my book.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this beautiful day, and we are thankful for all the opportunities that we have and that we can live in America. And we are thankful for our homes and for our wonderful families. We ask you, please help us have a good class that we'll be able to take this lesson into our hearts. And please help us make it home safely when the time comes. And please bless the missionaries on the mission field. And we do love you very much. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Brenna. Well, friends, you may have noticed that in the reading for today, I tried to help us to think about a few different ways to consider the Constitution's original views on slavery, because we'll see that some will be very positive about it, some will be very negative about it, and others will be in between, talk about this compromise and the reasons for it, et cetera. So I wanted to try to expose you to a few different ideas so that you'll be able to better communicate your own beliefs about this wonderful document and the men who wrote it, as we talk today in our class, as well as when you meet with others. So with that said, let's take a look here. You know, this is this interesting kind of moment where we see some who've been very, very negative. And so I wanted to start and just see what you would say. For example, if you were to meet somebody like Morton White, or if you meet William Lord Garrison, what would you say? Because historians have long debated the United States Constitution's initial sanctioning of slavery. How could slavery and racism coexist with liberty and equality in a nation committed to the, quote, self-evident truths that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Now, that's a good question. It's a fair question to ask, and certainly I remember that being on my mission, being in other countries, people have said, now, can you explain this? Because America is such a wonderful country, but yet, at the beginning, help me to understand. And so I think it's a fair question that we should be comfortable answering. As historian Morton White queried, had the Founding Fathers, when faced with the Barabbas choice, chosen slaveholders' right to property over slaves' right to liberty? Had they, as abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison charged, created a covenant with death? What would you say to those who might ask those hard, but yet, I think, fair questions? What would you say? Pass out our arsenal of microphones, your little torpedoes that they are. There we go. We can each have our own. Oh, wonderful. So, how would you answer that question? Welcome, Rachel. Good to have you. Please, Mrs. Anvil.
Well, obviously from the reading, they suggest that they made a compromise because they felt that they had to start something. They didn't want to throw the whole country out. They wanted to establish that Constitution, and the only way they could do it was to compromise. So I think that's the only reason a lot of them did it.
Exactly, and truly, you read it again and again and again, even as we'll look in detail at the sources as well as some other things. This idea of setting ourselves up to win later is better than not winning at all. And that's tough to swallow. I mean, it's, that's not the ideal, of course. And we have to be careful too, because some could say, well, according to that line of thinking, then I'll do X, Y, or Z now that breaks the commandments, because then in the end, it'll help me to have a stronger testimony of Christ. You've heard that, I'm sure. I've heard that. That's false thinking, right? That is not what we need to do. Okay, but yet this is a special case, and we do need to step back and always remember, right? The Lord has been very clear about the founding fathers, right? That these were not wicked men, that they were wise men raised up. So, given all of that, even with the tough questions, I love that response. Thank you for that. Anybody else? A different response? Let's take a look here, because I think if we were to take a look at, of course, we have some of the founding fathers working on the Declaration here, and think about this great vision statement. Really, in a lot of ways, we're always short of our ideal, right? Liberty and justice for all the time. I mean, certainly we're always working toward that ideal. So let me ask a question, and I think this is a really important reasoning question that I think can kind of take us to the heart of the reading without actually going there first. And it's the question of, welcome, Mr. Anderson. So great to have you. Welcome. Please come on in. The question that if you had to choose the vision of the Declaration, even if it couldn't be 100% fulfilled all the time, or any other vision for a nation's governance, which would you choose and why? Because there's some who say, Americans set themselves up to be constantly frustrated because they have a bar that's here and nobody can ever get there all the time for all the people. So why don't you just set the bar lower? What would you say to that? I've heard people have that discussion. Maybe we're just not practical enough. What would you say? Please, Camilla.
Well, then there's always the chance to improve.
Okay, I love that. Always the chance to improve. Thank you so much for that. Please, Samuel.
It's better to set a high goal and not reach it than to set something that's low and achieve it and still be way down low. Because if you shoot for something high and you really don't reach it, you still made a lot of progress.
Sure.
But if you make really low goals, you won't make any progress.
Okay. I love that. Thank you. Please.
A quote to relate to that, or some saying is, if you shoot for the stars, then you hit the moon. If you shoot for the moon, then you hit nothing.
Thank you. I like that. Thank you very much. Well, friends, let's keep these wonderful founding fathers in mind as we talk today, because I think this is very key. Let's reason some principles here, because I think this is interesting. If you look in the writings of the founders, you'll see that sort of more than any other argument, founder after founder after founder, other than, of course, those who are sort of on the extremes, as you'll see. And I tried to present a wide spectrum of views. There are some who are just saying, this is morally repugnant. I could never do it. I don't even care about thinking of compromising. I will not. And then you get nowhere. Right? On the other hand, you have those who are saying slavery is great. The North is just jealous because we're able to make so much money in this way, and they want to take away our advantage. That's I think on the other extreme, right? They see no problem with it. And then you have this view, which I think is very, very interesting to take a look at. Because on the other hand, as opposed to just talking about a covenant with death, as William Lloyd Garrison very angrily called the Constitution, though it recognized slavery in the short run, the Constitution made provisions to end the international slave trade after 20 years. Its first federal Congress confirmed the Northwest Ordinance's exclusion of slavery from the Northwest Territory. And out of moral disapproval, and this is interesting to consider, it might seem like a small thing, but I think it's important, the Founding Fathers refused to mention the word slavery in the Charter, in the Constitution itself. as Virginia's James Madison explained, it would have been, quote, wrong to admit in the Constitution the idea that there could be property in man, close quote. Nevertheless, in their analyses of slavery in the Constitution, most historians emphasize neither the founders' support nor their opposition to the peculiar institution, meaning slavery. Instead, they focus on the exigency, or the need, the great urgent need of compromise and the politics of what some have called half a loaf. Does anybody know what that means? Half a loaf? What are they saying there? Another saying.
Compromise.
Compromise. It's better to what than what?
It's better to get half of what you want rather than all of what you want and not get it.
Okay, right. So better to eat half a loaf than no bread at all. Right, that idea. Okay. How do you feel about that? What's the principle there? Because certainly, if you take this out of context, you could go down a very dangerous road. So what's the principle here? What are we really talking about? Are we saying let's just compromise our standards all the time just so people will agree with us and like us? Camilla?
If we just all of a sudden abolished slavery and made it illegal to own slaves, there would be so many problems that would come up that the South wouldn't really be able to support themselves anyway. That they had built their whole society on slavery, and so to compromise to take it away half at a time would have been the more prudent way to go, because it wouldn't have ended in complete ruin for the South.
Thank you for that great comment. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Please, Mrs. Edlin.
I think of the reality of life, and suppose you have a couple who really struggles in their marriage.
Yes.
That one companion is just really falling short in some way.
Yes.
Do they say throw it in, divorce, on we go, forget
Right.
the kids, or you say we'll work with this.
Yes.
It may be a long-term process, but we'll keep it covered.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that because truly it's interesting. I have seen so many people. Welcome, JT, by the way. I've seen so many people who are you saying, well, okay, this is wrong in a marriage, but yet there are a lot of good things. Let's focus on those, even as we still hope that things will get better with this one. And sometimes they do, and they're grateful, and other times they don't, and they make other decisions. But I think that is important, that we don't just throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. Mrs. Upton, did you have a comment? Looks like you may have a comment. So, but please.
In marriage, when you
Oh, sorry, I think it's just, thank you so much.
in marriage, when you make those kinds of compromises, it is better to be making progress than to be at a stalemate. But I think you still have to build in the provision that you will come back to those things and work on them when you've made that progress.
Yes.
You won't let them continue, because no marriage will be successful in the long run that is built on incorrect principles.
Definitely. And that's very important, very important.
And you can't say, well, I'll compromise on this in the name of saving the marriage. You can do that temporarily because you're supplanting it with something else. But in the long run, you can't continue on that premise and have a successful marriage.
I love that. And thanks to this idea of the difference between preferences and principles. Right? Certainly, in the long run, at least, there should never be a compromise on principles. In the short run, right? Maybe I love pizza. Maybe my wife hates pizza. Maybe she's allergic to it. And yet we work through something like that. But yet, this idea of I want to be together forever, she doesn't even care about God. I mean, that's an issue. In fact, I started dating a girl who this was at BYU. This is the first relationship I ever really had. I'd gotten home from a mission. She was very friendly. There were all these wonderful signs of this, that, and the other. And then we started dating, and we'd gone out to this wonderful concert at BYU. It was very inspirational, and we were just talking, saying, oh, I just love how this music helps me to feel closer to God. And I was sharing these things, and she was very quiet, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Maybe she's not feeling well. And then suddenly she said, I just don't even know if I believe in him. And I said, who? God. And suddenly, I was like, wait. I was like, here I am, and all of my expectations, all of the previous conversations we've had pointed to this, robust faith, I'm thinking, wait, I'm at BYU. I've flown from New Hampshire to go here so I can, essentially, in the long run, the most important reason for me personally was to meet someone that I could marry in the temple. That was my underlying reason for going there, And I was thinking, wait, and that was an issue. Please.
Was this before the day of the interview?
No, there were interviews. I mean, that she had an ecclesiastical endorsement, or just
Then
past seminary.
we have to add dishonesty to her
Right.
lack of faith.
Well, that's what I mean. Where there were so many things that I didn't know how it could have happened that she'd be there saying, oh, I don't even know if the church is true. I don't even know if there is a God, and on and on and on and on. And I'm thinking, is this really happening? That was clearly something that there would just be no compromise about. As much as I was loving and kind and tried to help, and I was in my, certainly let's resolve the concerns mode. I've just learned about this pattern of my mission, How do I do this in English? Let's see. We're trying to translate from Korean to English, Anyway, but yes, you're so right. And that's why this really is, you have to be very careful with this topic of compromise. Because certainly, we know the founders were inspired because God has told us that. But that doesn't mean that wholesale, oh good, compromise is always right. Because if somebody were to come up to me and say, why don't you accept gay marriage now so that in the future we can have a happier world? I just don't agree with that. I would never do that. I'm sorry, right? That's just wrong. And there's no compromise there. So once again, we have to take things in their context too. And so let's go a little bit more about this context. Jack Rakove, I think, did a good job in a book called Original Meanings, a really interesting book about the Constitution. Anyway, his assessment of the situation provides a case in point. He said, quote, the dominant view expressed by other Northern delegates, or the ones opposed to slavery, accepted the accommodation with slavery as the price of union. Though Northern founders such as Pennsylvania's Governor Morris had denounced slavery as the curse of heaven on the states where it prevailed, and a crime against the most sacred laws of humanity, welcome, their compromise on slavery gave Southerners what they needed to ratify the Constitution, which made possible the continuation of a union and a government that would, 8 decades later, realize America's overriding commitment to liberty and equality. As hard as their moral sacrifice was to swallow, many founders believed, and wrote about this extensively, that they made the right choice. Setting themselves up to win later was better than not winning at all. Like I said, you have to be careful with that line of thinking. But in this case, this is very interesting. Please, Mrs. Updike.
Yes, because what they did is exactly what we don't ever want to happen. They said they would address it in 20 years, and they didn't.
Yes.
And when we delay a decision based on the idea of compromise, especially something that fundamental, a nation cannot endure on that premise.
Yes.
So we said we would address it in 20 years, and we didn't keep our word.
Right.
To the people, to the Lord.
Yes, I love that. And this is why Lincoln talked about a new birth of freedom. We have to get back to the principles in the Declaration of Independence. Lincoln was a restorationist. Politically speaking, he was restoring the vision of Jefferson and the other founders as expressed in the Declaration of Independence. Please.
I believe that was the mission of his presidency.
Yes.
He could have freed the slaves the first day of his presidency.
Yes.
But it was preserving the Union.
Yes.
And he knew that if he freed the slaves that first day, this was a compromise on his part.
Right.
But he kept his commitment. He didn't free the slaves. He wanted to keep the Union. But then later he did free the slaves when it was more politically acceptable and would not rend the nation.
Yes, yes. Oh, I love this because it is so important to see that you end up needing a Lincoln to go back to this vision of the founders, and therefore Lincoln is clearly a founder because he is in line with the vision of the founders. Sometimes we think the founders, after they died in 1720s or 30s, depending on how old they were at the time of the signing, that those are the only ones. But anyone who goes back to those principles, those founding principles, could be considered a founder. And I love looking at Lincoln that way. Thank you so much. Wonderful comments. Wonderful. So friends, let's talk. By the way, Logan, you're looking old, my friend. You're looking mature. How old are you now? 12. You hold the priesthood. Wonderful. Anybody? When did you turn 12? In June. Okay, so the whole time we've been together. Well, today you look particularly mature. Anyway, good to have you. Friends, we're talking here about slavery and the Constitution. These are some very, very interesting things. I think, tell me, if you had been here at Independence Hall, Pennsylvania, sitting at one of those desks, what would you have done? You ever thought about that? Have you ever tried to, and once again, you can never know exactly what you would have done since you weren't there, but yet let's kind of put that aside just for a moment and say, what would you have wanted to do looking back? Would you have said, I'm just going to stand my ground, and if we never sign this thing, well, so be it? Would you have made that compromise, setting yourself to win later, hopefully, but yet no guarantees? Would you have just said, seems like slavery works for me, so I'll go with it? Please, Samuel, and then Caleb.
I think that I probably would have gone with the compromise thing, but I probably would have had it addressed sooner than 20 years, because then I can make sure everyone that is in this meeting right now is still going to be alive.
Right.
So,
versus, somebody's kids will maybe take care of
and
us.
then they don't.
Right.
So that's what I would have done, is made it sooner so that the same group of people could have started where they were before, after the union is formed, and get it done, and then 20 years later it ends up not happening, probably because most of those guys that were rooting for it were not able to, either they were too old to do anything about it, like their health was bad, or they were already dead. So.
Oh, thank you for that. This idea of kicking the can down the road doesn't lead to a clean street. That's right. That's right. Now let me ask you a question, Samuel, before we get to Caleb's comment. What if the Southerners had said, no, we want this to be done after we're gone. We won't sign it. The whole purpose is we want it to be at a time where somebody else is going to have to take care of this. Or we won't sign. No union. What would you do? I know it's a hard question. Not sure? Please, Mr. Anderson, is that a comment about this one, or is it Caleb? Yes. Yours is about this one. Okay, Caleb? Is yours a different idea or related to this? Different one. Oh, okay, let's have you, if yours is related to this, we'll go here and then back to Caleb.
There's a movie made, I think, called Making of the Constitution or something like that was put out about 10 or 15 years ago. Yes, thank you very much.
This is the one by BYU?
Yes.
Yes.
In there they have a few scenes of these founders at local restaurants or things like that. And I can just imagine them in their timeout going off to informal caucuses and hashing over these principles for all they were worth and putting their heart and soul into that. I don't know if any other place or nation in the world would have allowed that type of freedom of speech without, people getting killed over it.
Right.
As happened pretty often in Europe.
Yeah.
And so I think that says a lot for the virtue of those founders, that they knew how to disagree without being disagreeable. Like Uncle Verlin's mother taught us, and that you can shelf a principle and say, we're going to just disagree on this for a while, and then go back and address it when the timing is right.
Yes.
Even though it cost much bloodshed to go back and address it 80 years later.
Yes.
At least there was a seedbed for freedom, where things could be done and accomplished, and the ideal achieved with time.
Yes, I love that. Love that, because certainly the Articles of Confederation, and this is a point that you may remember from the reading, states could have chosen to continue slavery indefinitely if we had kept the Articles of Confederation. So yeah, these are interesting things to think about. Please, Caleb. Love that comment. Thank you.
So going through the readings, you can kind of see these people who are adamantly against any part of slavery or supporting any part, and aren't we all? I mean,
Sure.
No one wants anything to do with that. But all of them ratified it in the end. Like they did end up, even those people who were saying, okay, we're against this, they put their hand to the Constitution. And I think part of that is because they felt that spirit of the Lord that was, no, slavery is not something that anyone ever wants to condone, but it was a document that was brought about by God, and the Union was something that was brought about by God as a place of liberty to have the restoration take place. And like it said in the readings, sometimes we have half steps. And one of the things that I thought was that the Lord works with what he has, and so he'll lead us, he'll put us on that foundation, but we have to choose how we're going to go about building our house. So the foundation was there, but not everyone was willing to agree on the plans, basically.
Right.
So we got there eventually, and that's because we had to do a little remodeling. But the foundation was there, and they all did feel that that was something that needed to be there.
Love that. What a beautiful comment. Thank you so much. Very wise. Samuel.
And I know that there was at least one delegate that he knew union was super important, but he refused to compromise.
Sure.
And so he decided to just not show up on the day that they were voting on it because he couldn't vote against his conscience, but he knew that union was so necessary.
Right.
And so he just didn't show up on the day that they were actually like voting on whether to do it. And so there were some people that couldn't compromise,
Right.
but they found a way to still work around it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for that. Great comment for that. Anybody else? Any strong opinions about what you think you may have done? Is there anybody who would say, I honestly don't think I could have gone through with it? I just feel so strongly that I just could not have made that compromise. Just curious. Because I have to say there is, and I don't want to give this away now, but there is one of the representatives, and I just feel like as I studied his words a few years back and then decided to include them for you, I just felt, I feel like I have a kindred spirit here. Mrs. Updike, please.
This is something I've actually thought about, what I have been able to sign on to that.
Yeah.
But the alternative of not signing on was far, far worse. There was no guarantee whatsoever.
Yes.
And at least this way, everybody was committing in 20 years. Now, it didn't happen. Eventually it did.
Right.
But even though it would have been a very difficult compromise to make, it paid dividends in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So I think weighing that as opposed to having no guarantee remaining under the Articles of Confederation would have been wholly unacceptable.
Definitely. It's a great comment. It's an idea too, and we can't discount, because it's hard because we're not in that situation, we can't discount the Spirit of the Lord in this. I mean, think about Nephi. He's staring at a drunken Laban. He feels he needs to cut off his head. That was also morally repugnant to him, I'm sure, and certainly against the law of Moses that he had grown up with. Right? Thou shalt not kill. He's staring. Kill him. No, what? Right? I mean, this is one of those moments where not being there, right? Certainly, we know the Spirit of the Lord moved upon these founders. And the Spirit of the Lord can tell us to do things that don't make sense at the time. But yet, in the long run, the Lord knows they will be right. And I'm sure we've all had situations like that. And I would love to ask as we just kind of relate this, because I think this is a really important conversation we're having right now. Have you ever felt the Spirit of the Lord move you to do something that you didn't understand at the time, but later, looking back, you realize, I think that was why? When has that been for you? You were sure the Lord was prompting you to do something, but it didn't make sense at the time. Please, Isaac. We've got a microphone. There's several swarming around you. Yeah, thank you.
So, with a friend, I just received a prompting to go talk to him and just kind of stop by his house and see how he's going or doing. And he's just like one of those kids that's never like down or like he's always really optimistic and positive. And he came and hung out with some of my other friends that night. And we were just sitting in the car after everybody had gotten out, whatever. And I started talking to him. And like at first, before with all the friends, he was totally fine, just the same kid. And then I just started talking to him, and he just like bust out into tears about stuff that he's going through, and so it's like I didn't think about that he was ever even going through anything, but he kept it hidden. And so, but when I was prompted to talk to him, that's when he kind of came out and showed what he was going through.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for following the Spirit. Anyone else? When has that been for you? Tell you another BYU story. When I was in a student ward there, I was once asked to come to a home and give a young woman a blessing. And I knew the young woman fairly well from our ward, but didn't know too much of the specifics of her life. I knew what she was studying, and I'd been in gospel doctrine with her, that kind of thing. Anyway, well, when I went over, she said, my stomach has been hurting me for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I just feel like I need a blessing because I just don't know what's wrong, and I've been to all these doctors, and my stomach just won't get better, and I can't eat anything without it hurting. I eat grain, it hurts. I eat fruit, it hurts. Just anything she tried, it just hurt. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. She said, but if I could just get a blessing, I feel like that's kind of the last thing I can try. I said, oh, okay, I'm happy to give you a blessing. And anyway, so I put my hands on her head and I started giving this blessing. And I was listening to the Spirit, and I was saying some things, and I just kept getting this impression. She doesn't need a blessing about her stomach. I'm like, what? And so I was talking about some other things, just about kind of some of the Lord's feelings about what she was doing in her life, and that kind of thing. And I just kept getting this feeling that you need to talk about her relationship with her father, and that's the problem in her life. I knew nothing about her father. I didn't even know if she had a father. He could have been passed away for years. I just had no idea if she, had any kind of relationship problems with him or whatever. But anyway, so I was going along and saying what I felt prompted to say. And then finally the Spirit was just like, you need to now talk about her relationship with her father. And so I just opened my mouth and started talking about her relationship with her father, and all these words just came out. I felt like I knew exactly what to say. The words spilled out. And anyway, I finished the blessing. And she turned around and she said, how did you know? I didn't even tell you. I asked for a blessing about my stomach. How did you know? And I said, I didn't. She said, well, you were just talking about my father for about 5 minutes. I said, that was the Lord talking about your father, and I was just trying to listen to the Spirit. But it was so interesting because that was a time where I just realized very, very clearly in priesthood blessings, if that priesthood holder is listening to the Spirit, and you can know that because you too will feel the Spirit confirm that those words are being given by the Spirit, amazing things can happen. And I had no idea that that was what Heavenly Father wanted. And at the time, it felt, I was thinking logically it seemed wrong. She has told me very clearly she can't eat anything. She has a problem with her stomach, and it ended up being a blessing about her father. And I just testified that that was exactly right. And even years later, because she's friends with my wife, they were actually roommates at the time. Years later, she has brought that up and said, that helped me improve my relationship with my father, and I never, ever, ever expected that to happen. And so that's just my testimony, that when the Lord commands, as Joseph Smith said, do it. Very simple. He said, I've learned to make this my motto. When the Lord commands, do it. And when we're doing, bless you, when we're doing the Lord's will, we'll never be wrong, even if it doesn't make sense. And I'm so grateful for that. Anybody else, as we've been talking, think about an experience Because I would imagine that we've all had quite a few, if we think about it. Please, Brother Anderson.
Been home from my mission about a year, and I was at home studying for college in the home that I grew up in with my parents. And my mother came in and said, "Dad's dead." I didn't know whether that was my dad or her dad or whatever, you know. And she was all emotional and everything, and so I kind of, you know, tried to gather things together a little bit, and it ended up being my grandfather, her father, had fallen off a roof and either had a heart attack before he fell off or something. Anyway, so we were rushing over to the hospital, and we happened to get there before anyone else in the family, and the only other person there was the home teacher, and so they asked us to give him a blessing. Within an hour or so of his accident, I mean, he was still, his body was still alive. And I had my grandmother that I love dearly say, "Now don't you be promising him that he's going to live, and don't let him be a vegetable," and telling me all these things that I was supposed to say in this blessing. And I kind of thought, I'm supposed to be in tune and maybe not listen to all these other voices, but you know, these are people that definitely are exercising their faith in this situation. And so I went in with not a lot of confidence, because I thought, oh, just let the home teacher give them the blessing, you know. And the home teacher said, oh no, it should be a family member, type of thing. And just while we had our hands on his head, I just felt that I should promise him that he would be able to live, and that this would be a cause of uniting his family and helping them heal. Well, he was in a coma for 2 or 3 weeks. All of his children came. They had a beautiful opportunity to just be together for quite a few days and love each other and talk and solve things. And it was just, I thought, that was the Lord's speaking, not me, at that blessing, because it was really neat to see all my aunts and uncles get together and have that uniting effect.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Were you there, Sister Angela?
No.
Was that just a different?
His mother's father.
Yes.
Oh,
I
okay.
related to his father.
Got it. Sorry. I always forget which connection. So, well, friends, thank you so much for sharing these things. You know, I want to go in a little bit of a different direction with a quote by Elder Oaks, and I think this is an interesting quote. Because I think this might help a little bit with some who really struggle with the Constitution's sanctioning of slavery. It's a very interesting quote from 1992. Elder Oaks said, "Reverence for the United States Constitution is so great that sometimes individuals speak as if its every word and phrase had the same standing as Scripture. Personally, I have never considered it necessary to defend every line of the Constitution as scriptural. For example, I find nothing scriptural in the Compromise on Slavery, or the minimum age or years of citizenship for congressmen, senators, or the president. President J. Reuben Clark, who referred to the Constitution as, quote, part of my religion, also said that it was not part of his belief or the doctrine of the church that the Constitution was a, quote, fully grown document, close quote. On the contrary, he said, we believe it must grow and develop to meet the changing needs of an advancing world, close quote." And that's from President Clark. What do you make of that quote? It's a very interesting quote. What do you make of that quote? Is there any part of it that stands out to you that you think is important to maybe talk through for a moment? Please, Brenda.
I think it's interesting how he says it's part of his religion, but it's not like what he focuses on. I mean, it's good, but it's not perfect, like Book of Mormon or something. So yes, we can include that and we can embrace those principles, but it's not what we should build our foundation on or our faith on. That should be like Book of Mormon, the prophets, and yeah.
Thank you for that. I love how you use the word principles, because certainly the Constitution is based on inspired principles, just and holy principles. But interesting because you can kind of connect that. Elder Oaks is saying, the way he sees it, you can have those just and holy principles without saying that every line is scriptural. For example, the compromise on slavery. He's saying, I don't see that as being scriptural. But yet, there are principles in that Constitution that are just and holy. We can enjoy using those in our lives. Love that. Focusing on certain things. Yeah. Anybody else? Please, Isaac.
I think it's interesting how he says, we believe that it must grow and develop to meet the changing needs of an advancing world. Like I'll hear about people who want to change the Constitution and think like, oh, that's terrible, like shame on them, like they shouldn't be changing the Constitution stuff. But I guess what he's saying is that we do need to change the Constitution as this world develops because things are going to change, and like the Constitution isn't a perfect document, but through the Lord's help, it can, like where the Lord sees it fit to change, then we need to do that, I guess.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So this is interesting because certainly I think we want to think of sort of maybe two things that I want to offer. It's a great comment. On the one hand, I think we're probably grateful for the amendments that ended slavery. We're grateful that we had a Constitution that could grow in that way. That part of the Constitution is that its source of power is the people because God has given them the power to act and not be acted upon. So that's a wonderful thing, right? On the other hand, though, we have to be very careful because we have some who have said that the Constitution is an outdated document. And essentially we don't need it anymore, and so let's just change it so much that we can just become a different type of government altogether. And so, you see some kind of things to consider there, maybe two different things to consider. Caleb, please.
So I think that that's something that could be really taken and misinterpreted by a lot of people, like you're saying.
Sure.
We'll try to make those changes, like if you look at, people would like to amend gay marriage and make that an actual constitutional amendment, and the Supreme Court kind of took care of that. But, the only way to fix that would be through a constitutional amendment, which is probably not going to happen. So it's just interesting because people want to make all these changes to it, but those changes aren't necessarily what God wants or how they grow, because are we in the same spirit? Are we in the same spirit of the Lord writing the Constitution or rewriting or changing what we want to change, or are we going by the spirit of the Lord and saying, okay, what is true, what is establishing the freedoms that he wants? Look at ending slavery, look at giving women the right to vote. There's all these things that, yes, they're correct, they're true principles, but at the same time there are others who would say, well, let's throw out the spirit and go with what we want and change the document in a way that would make it not obey the Lord.
Yeah, love that. And I think President Clark's definition of grow and develop would probably be different than the definition of grow and develop of many people today who think that the nation should grow and develop with a charter that would support, for example, socialism or moral relativism, or anything that would take it away from those just and holy principles that make it such an inspired document. So this is a very important, I think, conversation. Love what's been shared. Please, word.
If people think that it's an outdated document, that's the only thing that's kind of holding us together as a republic. And if we look through history, what empire lasted the longest? It was the Roman Empire that was based on most of the same principles that we have in the Constitution. So if they would just look at history, then they would see that this is the best way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Please, Mrs. Evelyn.
And if you read the words of the writings of President Clark, you will know he was a very strong constitutionalist.
Yes.
So when he said that, I think you need to take that in context of everything else that he ever said in his life, which was very firmly supportive of the Constitution.
Yeah. This is not
Out of
something
where?
that a recent U.S. president may have said regarding, well, really the Constitution, take it or leave it. You don't really need it. It's outdated, worn out, that kind of a thing. Certainly, this is someone who loved and revered the Constitution as, and I think Elder Oaks. This is just a paragraph, but saying this idea of part of my religion. And he meant it, and a very strong constitutionalist he certainly was. So I love that, and certainly I hope that in looking at these complexities, we realize that we have from the Lord Himself. The Constitution was an inspired document. Once again, back to this idea of wise men raised up for this purpose. And also, the Lord Himself saying that this document is based on these just and holy principles. And so once we leave those principles, we may have something that people call a constitution, but it's actually become something else. And so this idea of a constitution is very important. What constitutes America in this Christian republic? And when we no longer have a Christian republic, are we the same country? And this is a very important thing. Think of who the God of the land is, right? Please.
I guess we could look at the hypothetical situation. Had those states not seceded, would there have always been too much opposition to ever amend the Constitution and give the African Americans full citizenship and voting and everything like that? It was not possible to add that just and true principle until they seceded. Then they had the majorities and everything else that they needed in the Houses of Congress to pass something like this. And if you look at other history, we have the Prohibition, where something was prohibited, and then after I don't know how many years, then things have been both inserted and then taken out. Great genius to have an inspired document that can still be modified appropriately according to the changing times.
Which is one of its great principles. One of these wonderful inspired pieces of the Constitution. Oh, I love that. Please. Caleb.
I think too, what a amazing principle it is that the Constitution allows itself to be changed. Even as the people get more and more wicked, it will not hold them under laws that they are not feeling free under. So if they want to choose wickedness and evil, then the Constitution allows for them to choose that. So it's not saying that this is a governing document that will govern you and these people chose and that's it. If you want to choose to reject the God of the land, then it wholly allows you your agency to do so.
Yes, I love that. When you think about Moses tried to bring the children of Israel to see the face of the Lord in the wilderness, and it would have been wonderful. But instead, they weren't ready. The Lord gave them what they could live with for that time. And when people were ready for a new law, then we had the messenger of the new covenant. And this is just that's a very important principle that you brought up. So, friends, I love what you've shared. Please, Gordon.
Well, this comment kind of supports his, because the people, they are the true governors. They set up the government, and they have provided the government to make the lives fair and safe so they can do other things. And so if they want to change it, then they can.
I love that. Montesquieu, backing up this wonderful comment, Montesquieu said, essentially, this is a paraphrase, a government will match the character of the people who create it. And so you think about the Christian constitutional republic that was created by the founders, and then you think about that quote and think about the character of the people who are now making decisions in government. That's a very interesting thing to think about. Please, this is uptime.
Having fought for, many years against a constitutional convention, I just have to say at this point that in the day of the founders, in that hot, humid summer, wearing their wool clothing those men still closed the windows. They would not allow anyone to know what they were doing because they wanted the freedom to change their minds. We would not have that liberty if we had a constitutional convention today. The media, excuse me, the media would have a free-for-all with a constitutional convention. The media is such an element that a constitutional convention today would be very, very dangerous. Plus, we have to remember, when the Constitutional Convention occurred, they completely did away with the old form of government. If we were to go for another Constitutional Convention, we would have no guarantee as to what we would end up with. And I'm not sure there are enough good, wise, and honest men who would be involved for the war to inspire them. So a Constitutional Convention these days is a very dangerous thing.
Yes, thank you for that wonderful, very wise comment. I love that comment. Well, friends, I want to share one more quote with you here, and I really enjoyed this one. Let's go to, all right, this one here. This is by President Benson. I think this is a very important thing to kind of help us before, because I'm helping us to kind of set us up for what I hope will be a really neat little debate here. We're going to have a role play simulation in just a few moments. So this is President Benson. This is from September 1987. Of course, why would that be an important moment in the nation's history? How many years? 200, okay? So the third important principle pertains to the source of basic human rights. Rights are either God-given as part of the divine plan, or they are granted by government as part of the political plan. If we accept the premise that human rights are granted by government, then we must be willing to accept the corollary that they can be denied by government. I, for one, shall never accept that premise. We must ever keep in mind the inspired words of Thomas Jefferson as found in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Beautiful quote. I'm sure you've read it 20 million times, but I think it's so important today. Because, friends, what we're talking about today is something that I think sometimes we really could become a little confused as we're talking about, oh, okay, but then things changed. Well, really, the rights never changed because they come from God. Okay? These slaves, even as they were slaves, had the right from God to life and liberty and property. And then when things changed, at least governmentally speaking, with amendments to the Constitution, it was simply asserting things that they'd always had from God. And then it's very, very important. And so with that said, why do you think God would want us to remember this quote today? As we talk about things changing, and please, because change seems to be the word that everybody uses these days.
The fact that governments are instituted to protect God-given rights. When men in government began to espouse this, embrace this concept that we're the ones that give the people their rights. It's the government. We're the ones. They're kind of saying we're the gods.
Yes, exactly.
We're the ones that are divvying up the rights here.
Yes.
And that's exactly what monarchical governments had over in Europe.
Yes.
France's king was the sun god,
Yes.
and this was just all powerful and everything else like that.
Form of idolatry.
Right. And when we do anything that takes away from God's holy power, it's very unstable ground, and that's a challenge because of the principles teaches that, whenever men get a little power, then they think they're, going to exercise unrighteous dominion, and maybe that's a lot of what goes on when people in government begin to believe they're so powerful that they can manipulate the rights and change them at will and without all of the checks and balances and things like that.
I love that. Makes me think of the time. I know I've shared this before, at least with a different class, but you may remember the story of when I was in Eagle Mountain and speaking at a meeting with the other citizens, and the city council was there. And essentially, they were trying to do something that I felt very strongly that it went against the proper role of government, and so we had a moment for citizens to speak, and so I raised my hand and I got a chance to go up, and I just said, would you please tell me how this fits within the proper role of government? I'd love to hear. And they started laughing at me. And one in particular essentially said, you think that you can tell me what the proper role of government is? You haven't been elected to anything. I've been on this council for X number of years. Government is simple. Our job is to give the people what they want. And if that's what they want, that's what they get. It's about people voting. And if that's how they vote, you better believe that's what I'm going to give them. That was his response. Talk about no other gods before me, right? Please, Mrs. Updike.
That's why President Benson gave us the qualifications of good, wise, and honest. He wasn't a good candidate, he was not wise, and he was not honest according to the law. We are all equal before the law. We all have the equal opportunity to understand it and implement it. And he was not honest to that charge.
I agree. Thank you. Please, Gordon, and then, is that a hand, Leah? No, oh, just stretching. Okay. And then Rachel, is that a hand? Please.
So, in 6th grade, we've been studying the some of the ancient civilizations and in Athens and Sparta. We're writing a paper on them right now. And if you lied, you could be put to death. Because, like, we've changed so much in our standards that people get away with lying all the time. And back then it was strictly forbidden. And I think if we had that, then we could actually trust people.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Times have changed, but God's laws haven't. So, well, friends, I'm very excited. What I would invite you to do as we think about these just wonderful principles of government, just and holy principles that we can find in our Constitution, I would invite you, as we go over a little break, to really think for a moment. If you could go back in time and become a delegate, become some representative from one of these states, how would you have voted, and what would you have shared as part of the discussion, which I love, as Mrs. Updike helped us to understand, really was free, and it was open, and it was honest, and they wanted room to really have a healthy debate. And we see they had wonderful, wonderful, wonderful debates, and so what you'll see is that much of the reading that you had for this topic came from debates where they were in the thick of trying to sort things out. And so given the fact that you've been able to think about, hopefully, some of the principles of good government in our first hour, as I get my secret envelope here ready, like I said, it's sealed, so that makes it even more special, right? I sealed it myself just for effect. But Leah, you can be the one to open it for us because, I think that would be a great honor. Not true? It would be. Anyway, friends, I would invite you to think about good government so that you can be prepared to participate in a hearty and healthy debate, which will be a simulation in which you will be asked to play the part of a specific delegate. And you'll see I'll have some information for you to help you do that in a very exciting way. Friends, I love you. I'm so grateful for our classes. I look forward to them every week. And I, even with my own children, I try to talk about all the things that we'll talk about at a little bit of a younger level, because they're a little bit younger. But it was so interesting because I was talking with my daughter Mia and she had some wonderful views and insights, and she was sharing, what about this? What about that? Why didn't they do this? And anyway, I was so proud of her, and so I am excited to see the connections that you will make as you reason and relate principles of truth as they apply to good government. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. So let's go. We'll take a break. We'll just take a 5-minute break as always, and then we'll come back, and then I'll show you the secret envelope, and Leah will be a big part of this here. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back for our second hour today. Same class. This is topic 3 in our African American history unit. And Leah, the time has come. Have you prepared yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this is quite an honor. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Come on up. Yes, please. All right, Leah, I have in my hand the Importation of Slaves debate envelope. I didn't even lick it, so don't worry, you're not going to get any viruses or anything. So I'm feeling pretty healthy. It was one of those self-adhesive, with a little peel it off, so you'll be good. So would you go ahead and do the honors of opening our secret envelope? And be careful because something might fall out of it. So. There you go.
Should I take this stuff out? Or?
Sure. Just take all of it out at once. There is a pattern there, so try to keep them in that same pattern. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, Leah, now, would you go ahead, ready? This is where it gets very exciting. Would you be the one to pass out the roles for our simulation? Sure. And just go in order, if that's all right. Just go ahead. And,
give them for myself?
Please do, yes. Oh, okay. Well, we'll miss you, JT. Thank you for letting us know that. Friends, what you'll see, and by the way, I should probably pass these out now. Does anybody need readings for today? Because you'll see you will use the readings. Brenna, you have some. Wonderful. Very cool, my friend. Do you need one? Great. Caleb, do you have readings?
My brother.
Your brother. Okay, brother. Good. That's okay. And then let's see. Do we have one? Okay. Logan has one, and then you're always prepared. The two of you. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. So the Andelins get an A for preparation. All right. Do we all have one? I believe we might. Okay. Wonderful. All right, well, friends, if you would go ahead and turn in your readings to the sources for today, can I just say these sources come, and Mrs. Updike, you do have, Mrs. Updike, may I touch one of your books here? Just hold it. So these come from the Founders Constitution, which hopefully you all love. This was actually just such a wonderful gift. Oh, thank you so much. Well done. This was a wonderful and touching gift, actually. On my birthday a few years ago, and actually from Mr. Heyman and others. I had other versions of the debates and the founders' writings, of course, but they heard through kind of the grapevine that they're very sneaky about this. They'd asked me, months before, oh, do you have all of the copies? I said, oh, I actually don't, And one of the students had asked me, just sort of in a roundabout way, Anyway, and so for my birthday, all the students kind of snuck into my room, and they had these packages, these big packages that were all wrapped, in wrapping paper. Mr. Heyman came in with his class, and my students were there, and they said, okay, happy birthday. They're saying happy birthday, and they said, open these. And friends, can I just tell you, these books have been a gift that has kept on giving again and again and again, because they're so rich. So, if you ever have an opportunity to borrow them or purchase them, I think you and your family would love them. But essentially what you'll see is that they have so many different topics and the words of the founders on those topics, and they have the words of the founders on every single article of the Constitution. And just, anyway, I think you love it. But just so you know, every one of these quotes for today's reading came from the founders' Constitution, and I typed them in by hand. Because I couldn't find a way to, do it otherwise. But I felt that they'd be very important for you to have. And so just, that's where these come from. You've got these 5 volumes here that are just wonderful. Anyway, with that said, you have a quote. You'll see you have a person. That person, or you'll see in 2 cases, a set of people, have quotes from the reading. Okay, you'll see that we have James Wilson from Pennsylvania, Joshua Atherton from New Hampshire, Rollins Lowndes from South Carolina, James Iredell from North Carolina, And then you also have a few different representatives from Massachusetts, from the Massachusetts Ratifying Convention, and then you have a few different representatives from the Virginia Ratifying Convention. So I am very excited for you to play those parts. Okay? On your piece of paper, what you'll see is that you will have a perspective to argue. Okay? I encourage you very much. You can even, if you're from the South, you can speak with a Southern drawl if you like. Okay. So if you're from Boston, you can talk about the car and the Harvard Yard, and not finish off those hard R's at the end there. But anyway, you'll have a perspective. Okay? Your perspective is listed at the top. Okay? It might say something like James Wilson, or you might have debate in the Virginia Ratifying Convention, which would mean that you beat all of those different representatives that are in that source. There'll be a couple of them. Anyway, as it says here in the instructions, play the part of representatives from Virginia, or yours might say something like, play the part of James Wilson. And then it will say, use logic and quotes from the source that you have in the reading to argue for or against, depending on who you have, the importation of slaves, which remember was supposed to end by 1808. It's part of the compromise. Okay? The compromise also included the 3/5 clause. Slaves would count as 3/5 of a person for purposes of representation. And then also the runaway slave or fugitive slave clause, in which if I lived in New Hampshire and somebody from South Carolina's slave ran away, I would by law have to give that slave back. I couldn't keep him because I believe slavery is wrong. So we've got the three compromises. Anyway, with that said, argue as if you were that person, okay, or those people, depending on which one you got. With that, any questions about how to do this? I really want you to try to assume the role. Yes?
If you have multiple people, how do you want that to be?
Just speak and state who you are at any given time. Or just say, at this point, I'm this person, and at this point, I'm this person from Massachusetts or Virginia. Those would be the two that have multiple people. Because I really like the interplay between them in the debate. What you'll see is that I've asked you to use both the logic. That means that you might not necessarily have quotes for that, as well as quotations, right? So you can certainly use lines from, let's say you have one person, that's a little simpler to talk about. Let's say you have James Wilson. You could use some of the lines that you love from him to make your points, And as I have said, and you can just read it, so-and-so, okay? At the same time, though, you'll probably want to go beyond just what they've said, because as the conversation goes, some things may be brought up, and you'll say, oh, now wait a minute. I need to think about his line of thinking, his logic, his reasoning. And if you can give comments in that same vein, then you are also true to the character. All right? Any questions on how to do this? So I'll come around and help you, but I want to give us some time to prepare. So read, reread, hopefully you've read it already, but read your part, okay? Read that little source. It'll be a paragraph. Yes, Leah?
Are there going to be some people that are the same as others?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So for example, as you were passing those out, you'll see that I provided 8 different things, is that right? Or 6? How many did I provide? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, good. There we go. 6. Yes. I provided 6. I was originally thinking about 8, but I went with 6. Provided 6 different things. So we have more than 6 people. So, for example, we might have a couple James Iredell's. And I'll be excited to see what you do with his arguments and the quotes that you use. And so, basically, some of you will be pro-slavery. Some of you will be anti-slavery. Some of you will be pro-compromise. Others will be anti-compromise. And so you'll see there'll be some different views represented here amongst us as we play the part. But I will come around and help each of you if you have any questions. Okay? All right. So let's take some time. Why don't we maybe just start with about 15 minutes if you need that. If you need less time, that's fine too. But 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be coming around. Prepare the quotes that you want to use in the debate, as well as prepare the logic, meaning he's saying that if something is a sin, I should never do it. That's a way of thinking. It's a great way of thinking, and so others would say, but yet if we don't set ourselves up to win later, then we'll never win. And so that might take some compromise. That's another way of thinking. So you could argue from the point of view of that person, one way or the other. Yes, sir. Okay, so go ahead and I'll come around. Gordon, please.
So,
Yes.
in 6th grade, we just really finished, his leader, basically, he still holds
Oh, yeah.
for his bands, conquer the world.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. Okay. Any questions? Who do you have, my friend? Joshua Atherton of New Hampshire. Wonderful. Sees he has some wonderful quotes that I think you'll want to use. So, who do you have, Samuel? Oh, okay, fantastic. Who do you have, Logan? Okay, so you've got a couple of different ones. Okay, so with that one, what you'll see is that there's a couple things just to point out there. So Kittery is actually in Maine. At that point, what we call Maine was part of Massachusetts. So anyway, so you'll see that we have this really interesting start with somebody who is essentially saying, I will not do anything that is sinful. I just cannot, go down that road. And then you have some others who bring up some really interesting points. And you'll see, for example, this one here. People are saying, listen, you have people in the South who own slaves, but yet they're asking for freedom. That's contradictory. It's a lot of different ways that you love. Isaac, who do you have, my friend? James here. Oh, great. Oh, okay. Sure. Oh, of course, yes. Thank you for telling me. I understand. Yes. Great note-taking, Brenna. Very studious. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You always felt bad, brother. A couple of us. What was that? Oh, okay. Good. Some of the language is a little bit elevated. In fact, there was one that I'll look at mine. Because mine is the spacing is different because my font's a little bit bigger. Oh yes. For James Wilson, who has James Wilson? Okay. The word interdiction is another word for delay. Just so you know, that might be one that you don't know as well. What do you have, Caleb? Oh, okay, great. It is a good one. Some wonderful quotes in that one. What do you have? Oh, okay. Great. Finding some good things. Good work. What do you have? Okay. Sorry. but an important view, at least for people to kind of learn how to talk to and with, because to play a key role, I'm sure. Good. Because it wouldn't be much of a debate if we all agreed, right? So it's going to be a simulation. I mean, we're going to have opposites. Oh, I love this one. I really love this one. I love it. It's not even for a day. This is like, somebody said, do you want to smoke marijuana? What about just for a month? Not even for a day. Not even once. I love that. All right, my friend, who do you have? James Wilson?
Yes.
Oh, good. And do you understand how to do this?
No.
Okay. So essentially, you're going to pretend that you're James Wilson as we talk together. And so as we talk about this idea of importing slaves and continuing the importation of slaves until 1808, 20 years, you'll speak as if you're him. You could. So let's say that somebody said, I think that we should do this because the North is just trying to take away our advantage. Well, you could say, now wait a minute. And you could read, that kind of thing. Or somebody can say, I think that we should not even consider this compromise. We could say, well, but wait, if we don't consider this compromise, we might never get to a place in which we can actually abolish slavery, which is what I want. Because when you say I, you're not speaking as you, you're speaking as James Wilson. because just he makes it very clear that he would hope that the compromise never would have had to have been made. Does that make sense? So kind of using his line of thinking as well as you can use specific quotes too from what he said. Does that help a little bit? Okay.
Yes.
Good. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. All right. Did you get one? Oh, good. Who are you? Oh, you have the Virginia group. Oh, wonderful.
I can do it justice.
Yeah, you've got some very great thinkers. So, yes.
So here when it says not exceeding $10 for each person.
Right. So
each slave bought,
each
person buying slave.
No, each slave. So basically, they're saying, we can make it a little bit less attractive to import slaves even during these 20 years.
But that's a 10 years slaves by taxes.
Right. To try to discourage it a little bit. A lot, way more than today. So, good thoughts. All right. Any questions, Brenda? Or Rollins, as I should call you? Rollina, maybe.
I was just wondering about the in this context.
Oh, sure. So you just think terrible. Basically, our state will be terrible if we allow this to happen. Nobody will want to come here. Good? What about you, my friend? Okay. Another boy. How much more time do you need, by the way? You feeling like you're pretty close, or?
I'm done.
Okay. Some who are done. You ready to begin the debate? Oh, please, let me come around. Okay, are we ready, delegates? Representatives?
Yep.
Okay. Well, with that said then, I'll just sort of get the ball rolling by saying, what think ye of the importation of slaves being part of our compromise? 20 more years?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Please tell us. You croaked first.
Okay. So,
Oh, and with the microphone, if that's all right. Thank you so much.
this is a good compromise because I am for abolishing slavery, but in order to get us to all be united, we've got to make this compromise because obviously we know that the southern states are going to have a really hard time if we destroy their economy right now. So we, even though it's against my conscience to let slavery go on, we are cutting back on slavery because here we are imposing a tax to reduce slavery, a tax for $10 for each slave that you buy. And so that's gonna, hopefully that will appease those who want it to stop now, but obviously that can't be done immediately. So this is a great compromise, and it's the beginning of a gradual change to banishing slavery out of this country.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson from Pennsylvania. Did you have a hand? I think here, and then Gordon. Did you have one before? From before?
I'll go.
Okay, tell me who you were. We need to address you.
James Iredell.
Okay, James Iredell from North Carolina.
So, I'm gonna quote it.
Yeah, no, please,
Okay.
quote away.
For my part, were it practicable to put an end to the importation of slaves immediately, it would give me the greatest pleasure, for certainly is a trade utterly inconsistent with the rights of humanity, and under which great cruelties have been exercised. When the entire abolition of slavery takes place, it would be an event which must be pleasing to every generous mind and every friend of human nature. I feel that if you wish for this way of living to continue, then you should reevaluate your standards.
Thank you, Mr. Iredell from North Carolina. Please, Joshua Atherton of New Hampshire. You can stand. I love it. Thank you.
We do not behold in that valuable acquisition so much boasted by the honorable member from Portsmouth, that an end is then to be put to slavery. Congress may be as much or more puzzled to put a stop to it than we are now. There is a great distinction in not taking part in the most barbarous violation of the sacred laws of God and humanity. So, yeah, we can't go across the border from God's laws.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Atherton from New Hampshire. Please, Rollins Lowndes from South Carolina.
I don't think 20 year, I don't think it should stop in 20 years. I really think it should just keep going, because the North doesn't understand how much we, the South, need slavery. I mean, it is a huge part of our economy, and you just don't understand how much that is important. And this is a quote: "Without Negroes, the state would degenerate into one of the most contemptible in the Union. Negroes were our wealth, our only natural resource, yet behold how our kind friends in the North were determined soon to tie up our hands and drain us of what we had."
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You realize the effect.
All right. Please, Rollins, round two.
I'll just continue. Why is it that the Noah, they're so jealous of our slaves? They want to take them away. And yet, this is religious. We are following religion in doing this. We have taken them from a worse place to a better.
Wonderful. You get the Oscar. Wonderful, Mrs. Angela. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I love it. This is interesting. This is interesting. So what do you think, delegates? We've taken them from a worse place to a better. So is slavery even wrong? Sounds like slavery has helped them. Any comments? Please, and who are you playing? Is this
I'm from Virginia.
Oh, yes. Okay. Multiple delegates from Virginia. Representatives from Virginia.
In answering that last comment, hear ye this quote: "As much as I value a union of the states, I would not admit southern states into the union unless they agree to the discontinuance of this disgraceful trade, because it would bring weakness, not strength, to the union." And it's extremely difficult to find a way to do away with slavery and yet still at the same time find a way to compensate all those people who have slaves as their personal property. And we feel that the sacredness of people having personal property is so great that it sometimes overshadows the moral rightness of having one person in slavery to the other.
Thank you. Thank you so much, delegates from Virginia. See you, Leah. See you, Logan. See you, Isaac. Thank you so much, friends. All right, well, delegates. Oh, we have, and let's see, is this James Wilson, or are you from Massachusetts? All right, we have our delegates from Massachusetts.
So, as General Thompson, asking the president, how is it that we have established our own freedom and yet we're going to deny that same freedom to everyone else. We make them slaves where we just secured our freedom. And on that note, how many slaves fought on our side and after securing our freedom are then denied that freedom themselves?
Thank you for that. Any answer to the delegate's question? Please, Rollins Lowndes, South Carolina.
Well, that's better than them being where they came from in Africa at all, because once we bring them here, we give them more chances in a way, because we bring them Christianity and we introduce them to like humanity, justice, and things that would not have been available for them in Africa.
Thank you so much. Great job, delegate from South Carolina. Please, Joshua Atherton from New Hampshire.
You call it justice when you don't even let them go and defend themselves in court? That was the wrong accent. But.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I love that. Thank you so much, Joshua. Let's see. Which delegate is this one here? Oh, James Iredell. We may want to hear from you if you'd like to share.
I think that if we agree to this 20-year compromise, then it will at least give us the opportunity to end this sometime, rather than if we don't go along with it, there will be no telling when slavery is going to stop.
Thank you. Thank you, James Iredell from North Carolina. Is this a Mr. Wilson over here? Mr. Wilson, anything that you would add? Any quotes that you'd like to read or other logic you'd like to share with us?
Sure.
We've got a microphone, I think, just right over, just over here. Oh, there it is.
I consider this as laying the foundation for banishing slavery out of this country. It is with much satisfaction I view this power in the general government, whereby they may land an interdiction of the reproachful trade, but an immediate advantage is also obtained, for a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation, not exceeding $10 for each person.
Thank you. So, great job, Mr. Wilson from Pennsylvania. Thank you so much. Excellent. Well, friends, are we ready to vote, or do we need to have more debate here? So I think most of you shared a good amount. Are you ready to vote? Joshua? Anything else you'd like to add? Okay, so we have Mr. Wilson from Pennsylvania, the delegates from Virginia.
So,
please.
For this union to work, we got to have a unanimous vote. So the southern states need to come to agreement with us on what's going to happen, because the union will not work if some states do not support the Constitution that we are setting up.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Delegates from Virginia.
We see this right to own and possess personal property as so sacred, something that so many of our European counterparts are deprived of and continue to be deprived of, that, as you can see, we have built into this Constitution the opportunity for those that do currently have human property as slaves. If they escape, there's a way to restore them and make them whole to that personal property by allowing them to come across state lines, even into a state in which the current laws of that state would indicate that slavery is morally wrong and repugnant. It still allows them to retain their personal property, which is at least some compensation and doesn't rob the southern slaveholders of their rights, their inalienable rights to pursue their happiness through their monetary means of income.
Thank you so much, delegates from Virginia. Thank you. Please, delegates from Massachusetts.
So to go along with the delegate from Pennsylvania, let's see, as General Thompson and other people have said, that the steps taken here have given more of an opportunity to abolish slavery, as there was nothing included in the Articles of Confederation that would. And as General Heath said, and I quote, or I guess, as I say, no gentleman within these walls detests every idea of slavery more than I do. It is generally detested by the people of Massachusetts, and I ardently hope that the time will soon come when our brethren in the southern states will view it as we do and put a stop to it. But to this we have no right to compel them. So be it as we believe, we cannot force them to do it, and we will all be more benefited if we all join the Constitution, ratify it now, and try to end slavery in 20 years. It's the only way that it will end. So,
thank you. Thank you, delegates from Massachusetts. Excellent. Any more debate? Joshua Atherton, anything else that you'd like to add? You're kind of alone in your position right now. We have a lot who like compromise. We have some who just like slavery.
I know that it is wrong to go against the sacred laws of God and are becoming guarantees for its existence for the term of 10 years. This barbarous violation of God's laws, slavery.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Great job, Joshua. Well, shall we put it to a vote then?
Yes.
All those who are in favor of the compromise by which the importation of slaves would continue in this country as codified in the National Charter, the U.S. Constitution, for the next 20 years until 1808, please signify by the uplifted hand. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, we got him.
Joshua! Joshua! You just said here, we will not lend aid of our ratification to this cruel and inhuman merchandise, not even for a day. Oh, thank you, Joshua. All right, so we have 4. How many are opposed?
you're on the side of the slave states? What is this?
Oh, we've got 4. Please, delegates from Virginia.
Mr. Chairman, maybe those that feel like they cannot vote in favor of the compromise and are at fear offending their conscience might be invited to leave so that we can proceed with the proceedings of this convention.
Indeed. Let's do it. Thank you for that. Well, friends, as you can see, it was quite the debate. Thank you for being a part of it, reliving it in some ways here. And I'd like to go and take a look at a scripture. As I think this is very important here. We'll go to this one. All right. Before we get to the scripture, actually, there's this quote by President Packer. I want you to imagine, and now you can be yourselves. You don't have to be anyone else. I want you to imagine that you did just get done with this compromise. And I'd like you to think about how President Packer might help us to understand some things about the United States, some principles. He said this: the Lord told them, quote, I established the Constitution of this land by the hands of wise men whom I raised up unto this very purpose, close quote. And in another verse, the Lord told them that, quote, it is not right that any man should be in bondage one to another, close quote. They were therefore anti-slavery. This was a very sore spot with the settlers in Missouri, talking about the Saints now being anti-slavery. And so on that day of celebration in 1849, quote, Elder Phineas Richards came forward in behalf of the 24 aged sires and read their loyal and patriotic address, close quote. He spoke of the need for them to teach patriotism to their children and to love and honor freedom. After he briefly recited the perils that they had come through, meaning the saints, the Latter-day Saints, he said, quote, "Brethren and friends, we who have lived to 80 years," so how old? 60 years old, "have beheld the government of the United States in its glory, and know that the outrageous cruelties we have suffered proceeded from a corrupted and degenerate administration, while the pure principles of our boasted Constitution remain unchanged." So there is Brother Phineas Richards. Anybody related to Elder Richards? Is that a curiosity? Okay. That's President Packer from 2008. He talks about the pure principles of our boasted Constitution. I would ask you for a moment to write down just 5 of them. Would you record 5 of the pure principles from our boasted Constitution? Because we do need to know, and I want to make sure that nobody misunderstands this. As President Packer quoted, the Lord has said, "I established," I meaning the Lord, "I, the Lord, established the Constitution of this land." Let's think about the pure principles of our boasted Constitution for a moment. Because in the debate, you did relive, even though these were debates for state ratifying conventions, I sort of just put all these moments in history together for our purposes today. You had a moment to relive the hand of the Lord as it worked upon those in different debates. That what they produced under the inspiration of God was indeed the Lord's creation. And those pure principles were from Him. So I think it would be very important for us to record just a few of those today. Go ahead and write down 5 of the pure principles of our boasted Constitution. Yes, sir.
Including amendments or no?
Sure, anything that you would consider part of the pure principles of the Constitution. How many do you have, Brenda? Wonderful. Well, I have at least a few to discuss here. A few of those principles. All right, I'd love to hear what you understand to be some of the pure principles of our Constitution, which the Lord Himself established. Who'd like to go first? Just share one of yours, please. Please, Camilla.
Freedom of religion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. Freedom of religion. Why do you think the Lord inspired that one? Hopefully this is an easy question.
So that the restoration could take place.
Thank you for that. I love it. Elder Marky Peterson said, "Let us never forget the underlying reason for it all." And then to paraphrase the rest, he said, the restoration of the gospel. And to have a place from which that gospel could then go forth to all the ends of the earth. That was the underlying reason for the Constitution. So, please, Brenna. And we have a microphone just there. Oh, here you
Well, Hello? Okay. What I put down was all men are created equal. Not that they get equal things, but that they have the ability to rise up and become. Yeah, they all have that potential, same potential.
Thank you for that. I love that. Why does God care about that one?
I guess because with our potential, we even have the potential if we try really hard to become like Him. And so when we are given equal opportunities to rise above what we are given, or just exercise that agency, then yeah, absolutely bring us to this level.
Wonderful answer. Thank you for that. We'll go with Samuel and then Caleb.
The right to personal property. I think that was really inspired.
Yes, tell me why.
Well, because people are created to act and not be acted upon. And part of being able to act is being able to govern our own property and be able to get the fruits of our labors and be able to do what we choose to with them.
Yes.
It gives us an opportunity to be stewards over different things and learning to grow that way. So.
Well said. I love that. And I think it's interesting too, going with that answer, there are many different definitions of communism, but Karl Marx once said that the simplest definition of communism that he knows is communism is the abolishment of private property. That's communism. Please, Caleb.
So mine was right to bear arms, and it kind of, I think, goes along with Sam's. It wasn't put in there, as some people like to say, for hunting purposes or whatever. It was put in there to protect from a tyrannical government. Yeah, it was to defend your personal property and your family. So I think less of it's less about having just, oh yeah, we want guns, we have a right to have guns. It's about having a right to protect yourself and your family and your property and your home, and being able to really say that, okay, I am the master of what is mine, and no unrighteous government or, tyrannical controlling person is going to come and take that away from me. That's mine, and it's mine to protect.
Thank you for that. Love that. Was Mrs. Anderson first, and then Mr. Anderson, please.
One that was mentioned numerous times in just the first part is the right to a jury trial. We've pretty much done away with that today because we have so many bureaucratic offices that just say, you're guilty 10,000 miles away and you're paying this fine.
Right.
A jury trial provides people that aren't tainted by power to see a situation as it is and say, he hasn't done anything wrong.
Yes. Oh, I love that. It's a great answer. Great and very insightful. Please, Mr. Anderson, and then Mrs. Updike. Unless you'd like Mrs. Updike to go first. Okay, Mrs. Updike and then Mr. Anderson, please.
But there's a level of understanding that comes with juries. We have lost, and the Utah legislature had a bill years ago for a fully informed jury to help jurors understand that they had the power as a group of peers of the defendant to not find in accordance with law. If we have to find in accordance with law, then we don't need a jury. And that's something that we're losing. I will never serve on a jury because all I have to say is I was called up years ago before Judge Green, who is a federal judge or on the federal circuit, and he said, is there anybody in this room who will not find according to law? And I boldly raised my hand and he said, you, out of here, because they have no control of you. But that's why the jury of our peers is so important. They can find according to their conscience, not according to law.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. Very important. Please, Mr. Anderson.
In fact, in the current jury instructions, that I do a lot of jury trials and I interpret for them, and they give you this big sheaf of jury instructions, and in there it says, it is your duty as jurors to decide the case according to the law and the instructions that I give you as a judge, basically. And that's
what kind of a jury is that?
That's in every single set of jury instructions that I've ever had to interpret.
Yes.
It's there.
Thank you for that. Very important to know. Yes. Please give them a
That's not a jury of our peers. That's the jury that tried Joan of Arc, who's already has a verdict in mind or a verdict that's being pushed.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Great reference.
It's
Thank you
the
for
jury
that.
of the government.
Yes. Excellent. Versus peers. Love that. Love that. These have been wonderful, friends. Please, Mr. Anderson.
This comment was sparked by what Caleb said
Yes.
about the right to bear arms.
Yes.
It's fascinating to me that on at least 2 or 3 occasions, that right to bear arms was flagrantly violated in the history of the LDS Church.
Yes.
Where they came and took away all of their arms, and then they were just at the mercy of mob rule.
Yes. Thank you for that.
I don't know if there are a lot of other similar instances in the history of this country of that right to bear arms being so flagrantly violated.
Thank you for that. Please give.
I think one of the things too that we see that hasn't happened as a country yet, but if you look at other countries, look at Germany, the first thing they did was take away guns from the people. And once you take away that, the people have no control over anything because the government is backed by the military. So if you want to force a people to do something, take away their ability to defend themselves, and they will do whatever you want, or they will be annihilated.
Thank you for that. Wonderful principles. This is up again, Mr. Anderson, please.
Several years ago, the country of Australia disarmed their nation. I remember watching on the media people walking to the pile of rifles and putting their gun on the pile, literally giving up their arms. The next year in the country of Australia, crime went up 300% because only the criminals were armed.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Mr. Anderson, please.
I fear that in our current state of affairs, this right to bear arms is slowly eroding away. As so many people seem to have the mentality that if we reduce the right to bear arms, then all of a sudden that will reduce violent crime in some way, but it simply is counterintuitive and not true.
Exactly. We give more power to those who will break any law anyway.
I believe those people know exactly what they're doing. I don't, it's fine.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Please, Gordon. We got one right over here.
Well, my brother, he's definitely taking advantage of that amendment.
Yes.
Because he and his wife, which is now Mrs. Anderson, she teaches third grade.
Yes.
While they were dating, they got a concealed weapons permit, and so they both carry pistols with them. And on their wedding registry for Walmart, they bought a shotgun for Walmart. So,
yeah.
They're taking this amendment in so that they can defend themselves.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that story. Well, friends, there's so many wonderful, wonderful principles, pure principles from our Constitution. And of course, just love with this here. And I think this is a scripture, especially given what we've shared today, I think is very, very important as a capstone from the Lord himself, obviously through his prophet, Joseph Smith, for what we've talked about today. This is Doctrine and Covenants 101, 77 through 80. According to the laws and constitution of the people which I have suffered to be established, and should be maintained, for the rights and protection of all flesh, according to just and holy principles, that every man may act in doctrine and principle pertaining to futurity, according to the moral agency which I have given unto him, that every man may be accountable for his own sins in the day of judgment, his own sins. Therefore, it is not right that any man should be in bondage one to another. And for this purpose have I established the constitution of this land, by the hands of wise men whom I raised up, unto this very purpose, and redeemed the land by the shedding of blood. I'd love to end with your testimonies about a line in here that you find to be incredibly and personally sacred to you. Please, Samuel.
I really love the part about that every man may act in doctrine and principle pertaining virtuity according to the moral agency which I have given him, that every man may be accountable for his own sins in the day of judgment. If the government didn't give us the freedom that we need, we won't. We wouldn't have the ability to learn and grow. We wouldn't be able to act for ourselves very well. And consequently, at the day of judgment, most of the judgment would be going on the government, not on ourselves. And that's not how it should be. It should be that we take responsibility for every action. And then that's when we can change our situation, and we can say, here, I'm not doing what's right, and I'm going to change that. But when you're in a situation with the government in complete control, you can't really do that. So that's how God works, to be able to help us become like him, as he makes it so we are accountable.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Samuel. Please, Caleb, and then Mrs. Updike. Or was Mrs. Updike first? I think you may have been first, actually. Mrs. Updike and then Caleb.
If I could just share a very quick story.
Please.
About a story of my daughter. It's a family story that to me undergirds the sanctity of the Constitution. For almost 240 years, we've had only one copy of the Constitution, and that is James Madison's copy, and of a draft of the Constitution until Gouverneur Morris copied it for the final version. But all we've had to look at in all of those months of drafting the Constitution was James Madison's draft, and we had nothing to compare it against. We have half a draft of a James Wilson copy, but that's all we have is half, and it's considered invalid for comparison because it's not a complete document. My third daughter has a law degree from BYU and then has a constitutional history degree from Oxford. When she was doing research for her degree, she was in the United States, and she went to the Philadelphia Historical Society, which holds a vast array of critical historical documents for our nation. And she was doing work specifically on James Wilson, and she went to the librarian, and in this library and in many libraries, they hold documents in boxes. They put them in boxes, and then as you handle them, you have to wear the white gloves. But they're kept in the boxes so they're not folded, they're not hung, there's no weight bearing on them. She requested the James Wilson box. And as she took that box to her desk, she noted that that box had not been checked out for 150 years. And as she opened it and was looking through the documents, she said all of a sudden it was as if she could hear angel wings in the library. She said there was one other person in the library at that time doing research. And she said, I realized that I had just found the other half of the James Wilson document. And she said the other person in the library came over to me and said, there's something happening here. I can just feel it. What have you just found? And so because she found the other half of the James Wilson document, it went out in the press worldwide. Now we have a full document that can be used in comparison to the James Madison document, because you can
Right.
verify one against the other.
Yeah.
And so that was considered a major find. Not that it had really been lost, because it was there all along, but
Right.
nobody
Right.
knew that it was there.
Wow.
So that's a thrilling story in our family
Mm.
that undergirds the importance of that great document.
Yes. Oh, I love that story. Thank you. So what a marvelous
And it
story.
was found by Latter-day Saints.
Yes. Oh, I appreciate that so much. Thank you for sharing that. It was so fun. Anyone else? Piece of this quote that's very important to you personally. Yes. Microphone. Thank you.
I'm trying to reason in my mind the different meanings for the very last line. Redeemed the land by the shedding of blood. I imagine that could refer to the bloodshed at the Revolutionary War, in the Civil War, and Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery and all those martyrs who gave their lives for principles of truth upon this land.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that comment. Please send them.
To go along with that, wasn't, it says redeemed, redeemed from what? So, like, in the Book of Mormon, near the end, wasn't there a curse put on the land because of how wicked the people were?
So certainly you have different curses upon the land, but the interesting thing is the Book of Mormon also talks about how the land itself is sacred.
Yeah.
You know, and we know from many other accounts that this land is one in which throughout its history people will be brought here by the Spirit of the Lord. And I think it's interesting to note this idea of redeeming the land. Of course, you can look at that in a lot of different ways. Is it redeeming it from the sins of the British that allowed us to not be as free as we needed to be? The sins of the Nephites, the sins of the Lamanites, right? Is this also
lifting of the curse? Or?
Is it lifting the curse? Is it the atonement? Right? That this land wouldn't be able to be a land in which Jesus Christ was the God of the land without the atonement that he performed to redeem not just the people of the earth and every other earth that Heavenly Father's created, but also the land itself? It's a good question. It's a really good question. And so I think that the best answer is to say, I don't know if there's just one interpretation. In fact, I think there may be more than one way prophets of God have taught about this concept. I know at least one way that they've taught about it is very specifically the War of American Independence, this Revolutionary War, and how that blood needed to be spilt for us to have the freedom that God wanted us to have, just like Christ's blood had to be spilt for us to have the freedom God wanted us to have in this very sacred act. And just like, again, you think about how the Civil War was another act, and obviously that's after this was written as a revelation, but if Revelation can be read dualistically, looking forward as well as backward, etc., certainly the land would again be, back to Brother Anderson's comment here, redeemed by the shedding of blood, so that it could be bought back as well as brought back to the principles upon which it was founded, a new birth of a freedom that had already been stated by Thomas Jefferson. And if you read the Gettysburg Address, which we will, just give us a couple more classes, we'll look at that again. This idea of Lincoln saying, "This isn't some new thing. I am trying to get back to where we used to be." And so I just testify that God wants us in so many ways to get back to the purity that he would have us enjoy as a nation. And we can be part of that movement to teach correct principles. Then, of course, let people govern themselves because, as we see here, it's not right for us to take away anybody else's agency. But certainly, it's also not right for us to sit on the sidelines and let secularists take over the nation. We do need to stand and be counted and bear our testimonies in favor of Christ, who is the God of this land. That is my testimony, as well as an invitation to every one of us to do what the Spirit would have us do to keep that flame of liberty, which, as we know, is nothing but that flame that comes from the Spirit of the Lord, burning brightly in this nation. And I share that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Caleb, would you leave us with a prayer, please, my friend?
Our dear, kind, and gracious Father in heaven, we come before Thee in a spirit of gratitude for this wonderful class that we've been able to have today. We thank Thee for the Spirit that was present here and for the principles that we were able to learn and to reason and to hopefully come to a better understanding of. We thank Thee for Mr. Gentile and for the Spirit that he invites and the preparation that he gives, and we are grateful for this country in which we live and for the inspired Constitution which governs us. We ask at this time, Father, that we may be able to keep these principles in our minds, be able to defend them on every count whenever we are able to. Help us to be able to preserve this Constitution, preserve this land, and to truly make Jesus Christ the God of the land again, and be able to reflect that in our own lives, be able to make that change in a more broad sense. We ask that a blessing may be upon this country and upon Thy people, and that we may be able to more fully return to Thee. And we thank Thee again for the gospel and for the fullness on the earth. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you, friends, for a wonderful class. I look forward to our time next week.